You stupid bitch. Yeah, you're a stupid bitch. You stupid bitch. And look who it is. Look who's back and fresh and his skin looking glowing.
Who's back on Australian soil once again.
Yes, you look glowing, you stupid bitch.
Oh, thanks. That's all the facials that I've had.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
All the
That's, you know,
cheap.
yes, I know. Because when we went over too, we got manicure. Like when I got a couple of
Mm.
manicures, we got the mani, the fucking blackhead extraction from the nose, the earwax candling,
I should have got the
facials.
blackhead thing actually.
Oh, that was cool. It hurt, but it was cool. And then when we came back, Vinny and I were like, oh, yeah, we're going to treat ourselves. We're going to definitely keep getting manicures at least. And then we look at the one that's underneath our building and it's like fucking $70 for a manicure or some shit. I'm like,
Oh.
fuck that. I'd fly to Bali. I'd rather just fly to Bali to get it.
Yeah, well, I had a mani and pedi just before I left because I wanted nice nails before I went. So there was no point me getting a mani and a pedi.
Yeah.
But I got the earwax candle and I sent you some photos. So
Yeah.
I've got it in my notes. I want to talk about it in the intro, but I guess we better talk about what's happening this evening and what we're doing and what this is.
What this actually is. Well, welcome everyone to Stupid Bitches Say What. It is a podcast about everything and nothing, and it's recorded live in Australia.
And it's
And this
always usually
week,
with wine or beer.
and it is always usually with wine or beer, or some alcoholic beverage, or a collagen hot chocolate. And I think
Yes.
you're drinking something not so alcoholic, it looks like, but we'll get to that in that
Yes, we'll
part.
get to that in that little segment. That's
But
right. That's right. And it's also featuring your hosts, Skye
Skyly Collett,
Collett and Sean Bino Hipkins.
it
What a stupid bitch he
is.
is.
I am a stupid bitch. It's been what, 2 weeks since
Hurrah.
recording? Three?
I think it's been about three
Three,
actually,
yeah.
because I think
So
we both got quite busy before I went international, please.
she did go into Nash.
So yeah, I think it's been a little passel.
It has, it has. And tonight is True Crime, our second last one of
It
the
is
season.
your little favorite.
It is my fave. And what, pray tell, is it that you are drinking from that stupid bitch mug, you stupid bitch Sky?
Come on, a little tiny bit of a detox. For listeners, I will go into a bit more detail shortly, but I did just come back at about, I walked in the door about 10:30 p.m. last night from Bali. So tiny little bit spaced out. I wouldn't call it jet lag. I would call it readjusting to
Yeah.
life. And I certainly don't want to look at another alcoholic drink until at least the Christmas festivities begin, which is
Oh,
only
you
about
stupid bitch.
it's only about 2 weeks away.
And it's,
Anyway, because
you know, that's going to last till Thursday night.
I know. I'm also going away from work for work later this week, and I reckon there's going to be lots of drinks there.
There'll be a red wine in for sure.
But yes, I'm surprised I don't look like a Bloody Mary because I've drunken about 40 of them. So I thought this
Were you
evening
just having them for breakfast or all
I
day,
was
every day?
all day, every day. It was my drink of choice. Look, I
That's
had a
a
lot of different ones, but certainly the Bloody Mary was up there with my favorite. And I like it super spicy too. And
right.
people were just like, "Oh my god, how do you fucking drink this?" I'm like, "I love it. The spicier, the better." And like, my throat would be burning, and my chest would be burning, and
Oh,
my
that could
nose
be
would be
good
burning.
feeling too, can't it though?
Yeah, it
That
was it
throat
was
burn
lush.
feels like it's
Um,
cleaning shit out.
it is, yes, yes, it did. It felt very detoxing, but there was a lot of vodka in there. Anywho, so what I'm drinking, that's my justification for what I'm drinking tonight, which is just an herbal tea. I got used to a lot of
Herbal.
herbal teas in Bali. I was going to try to create my own and make one from scratch, but I ran out of time. So I'm just drinking from tea. But like the Balinese ginger and honey one that they do, it's fucking delicious.
Yeah, I like a lemongrass and ginger tea. Mm.
Ooh. So this one is a little mixture. It's a ginger kick is what it's called. So it's got a bit of ginger
Oh,
in, but it's also a chamomile, honey, and vanilla. So I put
very
two
good.
different tea bags in. So that's what I'm drinking.
Very good. Ginger also good for the throat, plus.
Yes, yes, indeed, especially when you're talking as much as I talk. Um, and what are you drinking, stupid bitch? It sounded a bit ting ting a ting a ling, like you're drinking a
I'm
bit of wine.
I'm drinking a Pinot Gris, plus.
I've got FOMO.
And it's delish. It's a Moss Brothers, Margaret River, 2023. So it's a toddler,
All
a wine
right.
baby,
Mine, baby.
by Moses Rock.
Mm.
Well, Moses Brothers, Moses Rock.
I haven't heard
And
of
it's a
that, but it looks
stallion.
interesting. Oh, it looks lovely. It looks like something that I'd definitely pick up at the shops.
It's a good pair days, that one.
I like that. I like it a
Mm.
lot. Look, you know what? I have severe FOMO now, so maybe I'll finish this cup of tea and just go pour myself a little bubbles
See how we go.
just to
Well,
join in. God,
speaking
I'm
of
shocking, aren't
bubbles,
I? I'm talking about detoxing till fucking Christmas festivities.
well,
I
you've had a
see you
tea.
pour a wine and I'm like fucking, oh.
I was like that anytime, especially during maths when the dinner party's on and I'm
Mm.
not drinking and I see them drinking a red. I'm like, baby, I'm getting a red.
Whenever
It's
I'm reading a book and they pour a glass of wine in a book, I'm like, ooh, maybe
that sounds
I'll have a
great.
drink.
That reads lovely. But speaking of bubbles, we do have to do a
Yay!
very special shout out to one of our dearest listeners, Rachel, who got us both, and yours is still here,
I know.
celebratory bottle of 100 EPS plus such stupid bitches. Kiss, kiss.
Oh, Rach, we love it so much. You're such a wonderful friend, beautiful
So thoughtful,
person.
so thoughtful. The
So
thing
thoughtful.
is, I just don't know if I could ever open it.
I was thinking the exact same thing. What do we do? Do we actually drink it or do we keep it forever?
I've got to keep it forever
I
because
feel like
otherwise,
we do because then
if I
even
drink
if
it,
you put a nice plant in it after you've
yeah,
drunk it, you could do that, but still it would get icky after time and the label would start to fade and
I don't know
yeah.
if you can see it. You see that black blob on top of the bookcase?
Sure. Yeah.
In front of that, that's what we did. There's our Dom Perignon. And remember, we got that bottle of Dom and we put a little growy plant in that.
Oh yeah.
And that's nice. But I just still like the gold top and everything on that stupid
Mm,
bitches one. So I don't
yeah,
know.
I know, I know. Maybe we'll drink one. So maybe we'll drink one and I'll put a plant in mine and you can keep the other one.
Okay. Or maybe we pop it at the 200th episode.
Oh my God, yes, that would be amazing. Let's do that. I
But
love that
anyway,
idea.
how has your week been, please?
Oh, look, my week has been absolute bliss
Have you done
because
anything special?
I
Been anywhere?
spent 10 fabulous days in Bali. It was insane. Look, there was a little bit of concern around the whole Bali volcano thing.
Oh, yes, that's
Um,
right.
it actually, I think the volcano happened a day before we left or a day after we left.
Yeah, I think
But
it
the
happens just
ash
when
and
you were there or
stuff,
something. Yeah,
yeah, the ash and stuff didn't happen until a few days after, but we were getting constant messages from her going, oh my God, are you guys safe? And it was quite a ways away from us, but it was on the flight path home. So,
right.
so many flights got cancelled. And there was actually a friend of mine over there, and he was supposed to leave the Thursday of our first week. And then he got delayed. He's still there. I think he's coming home today because their flight got delayed for like 5 days because there was so many delays. I guess if some people were flexible about rebooking, they were rebooking them further out as opposed to putting them on the next available flight. But I'm pretty sure that the flight stopped for about 3 or 4 days. But we were pretty much drunk throughout all that time swimming in the pool bars. So it
I didn't
didn't
even
really
notice.
know much if we didn't get the text messages from people.
Well,
Um,
perfect timing, really.
we wouldn't have known. But it was funny because we were on Gilly Tea. That was the time. So we went to Nusa Dua first for 4 days, which was absolutely fabulous. Stayed in a resort, quite fancy. Wanted to start our holiday off right. And we certainly did. Met a lot of fabulous people
Very good.
around the world. It was super super fun. We had lots of new Facebook friends.
And then you met a Vinny and Sean, I
We
hear.
did. We met a Vinny and Sean lookalike, but they weren't actually together. I have to tell you that whole story, but I'll tell you
Ah,
the story. That's a
were
that's a
they
you
gay?
and me story, not a
Oh,
podcast
okay.
story. Yes. Um. Anywho, so then we went to Gilly Tea, which was the island that takes about 4 hours to get, which was a fucking mission. The way there wasn't as bad because we were quite excited. The way coming back when we were super fucking hungover
Four
was
hours.
brutal. I thought I was going to die.
And was that a quick boat or
They called the fast boats, but they still take like the way back took 4.5 hours. The way there just took just under
Jesus?
4. And you stop at the ports and there's no aircon and you're absolutely sweltering and there's a tiny little roof outside. Um, that can fit maybe 10 people on, but there's the boats are so packed, so you can't really get out. And I've since Googled it to see if there is air-conned boats that you can, and I can't actually find them. I'm sure there has to be,
Yeah.
but maybe it's just about researching a little bit. But it was quite cool at Gilly, and that was when the volcano was happening, and even the Gilly people had no idea because there was ash all over Lombok, and we were like, not super ash, but there was like this really fine film, and we kept
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, is that because of the volcano ash?" And they were like, "No, no, just the rain." We're like, I don't know if it is the
I don't think rain brings ash. Yeah.
and then they realized, they were like, "Oh yeah, there's been a volcano," but that was like on day 2, and it happened like the day before we got there. But Gilly Tea was cool. It was very much a schoolies young people vibe though.
Right.
So it was
Oh, because yeah, it was around schoolies, wasn't it?
oh yeah, it wasn't so much that there was lots of schoolies, like legit schoolies there. It was just that kind of vibe.
Right.
Like it was very, very young.
Right.
We went into the only air conditioned nightclub on Gilly. And it was just people who barely looked 18, dancing in cages and stuff. And
Right.
Tyler and I
Yeah,
walked in and we were like, oh no,
yeah.
it's not for
Whoop,
us.
and back out.
Straight out.
Yeah.
And a lot of the clubs were like that as well. And they really didn't start kicking off until like 11:30 at night either.
I know,
So
it's just
everything
hard
was
to do.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
it's not our vibe anymore, is it?
yeah, it was cool. It was a good experience. If a bunch of people were going, I
Yeah,
would go, but I
I
think
get it.
you need a bunch of people to go with.
Like a Magaluf type thing. You could go as
Yes.
a couple, you wouldn't have the same thing.
It reminded me exactly of Magaluf. I kept saying
Right.
so many times, oh my God, this just feels it's got a full Mags vibe about it.
Right. Yeah. So you need a few people. I get it.
Mm.
I
Um,
told you about how I went to that nightclub in Darwin, didn't I?
I can't remember actually.
We
Did you?
so it was our very last
Oh,
night
you got
after the
invited. I thought
conference.
you got invited to the nightclub, or is that a different situation that we're talking about when the you got
Oh,
propositioned?
yeah, that was the night before after the
Right,
gala dinner.
right.
But no, so it was on the last day of the conference. Everyone would finished all work. Everyone's rooted, but it's just like that moment of everyone gets together and just has fun.
Like at
Um,
afters.
yeah, kind of, yeah. So we went out for a dinner and then went to that dueling pianos bar, which was cool. And then me, Rachel, her partner, and Kim, we fucked off. We went to go to one bar. It looked horrendous. Gilligan's, not Gilligan's, Shenanigans, and it just was like too hectic. So we're like, oh, we'll go to
Yeah.
this other one we saw the other night. Looked quiet, nice vibe. Sit down, have a quiet drink. You had to enter up the side street. We went in, and it was turned into a full blown nightclub, and everyone dressed up in Halloween shit. And there was like a DJ dressed as a nun, and like 6 different people around him dancing, like in scantily clad outfits and shit. And the same thing. Like I was the oldest in there by about, I'd say 15 years. Well, and then we were the oldest in there by about 15 years, but it was proper fucking electro doof doof doof. But we were so pissed anyway. We are just like,
Yeah.
fuck it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was the time when I was just like, oh, yeah, this is like a one-off thing.
Yeah. Not my vibe.
Yeah,
And then we finished in Seminyak, which was great. We had another resort style thing right on the beach, lots of clubs along there, like, more beach club type scene and stuff like that. But we were pretty much in chill mode by the time we got there.
yeah.
You'll be pleased to know that I read 3 books
Very good.
while I was away, and started a 4th. Yes.
Nice.
I read one that I think you'll be interested in. It's called Margot's Got Money Problems, and they're just
Oh,
about to make it into a TV show, and it's going to have Elle Fanning in it, I think, is the main character. But it's basically about a girl who falls pregnant to a university professor. He says, get rid of it. He's not interested, leaves her. She decides to have the baby. No one supports her. And then she doesn't realize when she decides to have the baby just how difficult it's going to be financially. So
right.
she loses her job because she can't get care, and she waitresses of a nighttime. There's no daycare of a nighttime. Her mum's sort of not really good with kids and disowned her a little bit. So she starts an OnlyFans account,
Oh,
and it's just how that progresses, and it's actually quite good, and they're making a TV show out of it. So
is it based on a true story or anything?
no, I don't believe so. It could be. I'm sure that happens every day.
Did you finish Final Girls? Have
I
you read
did
that?
finish Final Girls. I gave it a solid 3, I think maybe a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was a little bit strange. Like the writing style didn't really gel with me. It was a bit all over the place,
Right.
a bit disorganized, I guess. So I wasn't a massive fan of it, but I've also heard that that writer, because she writes heaps of other really crazy titles, that's probably one of her least popular books as well. So
Right.
I've got another one upstairs that I got from the library. I'm gonna give it a go.
Okay.
But then what was the other thing? Oh, and so the other thing I wanted to talk about while I was in Bali. So before I went, I've always wanted to have a dirty martini, which is the martini that they shake up and then they put the olives in, right?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to have like a proper made one, like one that's made professionally,
Professionally.
not just a shitty one that you get from the pub. The whole way that we went through, every restaurant we went to, every place that we stayed in Bali, no one did a dirty martini with olives. They did a martini, but they didn't do the dirty with olives. That's shaken and has two different kinds of alcohol in.
I wonder if
Anyways,
it's an olive issue. I wonder if they have
well, a
a
dirty
shortage of olives
martini,
over there.
from my understanding, is vermouth, gin, or vodka, and then a splash of the olive juice from the olive jar, and then 2 olives in it. And that's why
Right.
it's dirty, because the juice gives it a different
Right.
taste.
And color, I'd say.
Yeah, that's right. But it's a lot of alcohol. Like it's 2 shots of alcohol straight with no mixer
Jesus.
except a splash of fucking
Olive juice.
olive juice and 2 olives in. Anyway, so I've wanted one. I've tried at every place, tried to find one on the menu, asked bartenders if they could make me one. And when they all like freak out a little bit, I'm like, don't worry about it, because I don't
Yeah.
want you to make it if you don't know what you're doing.
And it's going to be a shit one. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted a legit one, like you see in the movies. They're
Yeah.
like giving a dirty martini and it's got the 2 olives and the stick, and they're like, ah. Anyway, so we got, of all places, we got to the airport coming back. And did you know there is a lounge in Bali that you can go into?
Yeah, I told you about it. We
I
paid
thought
for
you
it.
told me about the one in Australia
Yeah.
coming over
And then we
was the
got
same
one
thing.
on the way back, but we got it in a package with our fast pass to get through customs part or the departure part.
The visa, the
Yeah,
electronic
you pay
visa.
no, and you pay for like a little fast pass where someone collects you and you skip a few lines, and then we added on the airport lounge.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
And you
about the
got
fast pass. We had a porter who skipped us through some lines, but we paid him $5 for that.
oh yeah.
But yeah, then we went and checked, and it was $60 a head. Yeah, and then we were like, are we really going to drink $60 worth? And it was a buffet food as well. And
Yeah.
Tyler was very over Balinese food by that time, and buffet type food. he just wanted Aussie food. He was like, I just need some
A burger.
just yeah. And even though he had a lot of burgers, they still had that Balinese sling sort of like twist to them.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we go to this sports bar and we look on the fucking menu, and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Actually, it was about 10:30 in the morning. And they had a dirty martini, and specifically it had in brackets with olives. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like,
It's
it's
meant to
10:30 in the
happen.
morning. Do I really fucking have this
Yes,
martini?
airport rules are so different when it comes to drinking. You could be there at 4 a.m. and you can still
Oh, well,
drink
we were
without.
drinking on the way over to Bali. We were drinking at like the bar opened at 5 o'clock, and we were like
Yeah.
banging at the door going, are you open? Are you open? Come on, let us in.
No rules when it comes to airports and drinking.
So
International in particular.
yes, absolutely. So I finally had my dirty martini, and it was absolutely delicious, and I
Oh,
loved it. And I
okay.
just hope that I can find them in Australia that are made like that.
Yeah, I've never had
Um,
one, so we'll try and
do
have
you like
one.
olives though?
Not really. I've had a few
Oh.
that I'd like, but I'd still drink it.
Mm. Yeah, I think if you didn't have that, like I think a normal martini is just the alcohol with maybe a squeeze of lemon or something in some of them. I'm not sure. Um, but I think if you didn't have the splash of olive juice, it'd just be like pure. Like, and I drank
Burn.
it. I had a sip and I was like, oh, this is really nice. And then we had a meal. I'm drinking this, and then I was like shit faced. I was like, oh my God, I've had one drink.
Oh,
And we
that's right.
have to
Yeah.
walk to the gate, and I'm like, I'm so drunk.
Can you push me?
And Tyler got a double JD. So we were both like, ooh, was this a good idea?
So it was a great holiday overall.
It was a wonderful, wonderful holiday. So glad we did it. Planning the next one, just trying to decide if we'll go back to Bali or we'll go somewhere different. And when we have to, work in with fucking football. So
Well, true, true.
yeah, yeah. So that was me. How's your week been, you stupid bitch? I've missed you. Mwah,
I've missed
mwah,
you too. It's
mwah.
good to see you, stupid bitch. My week's been good. So since we last spoke, I finished Agatha All Along.
All right, yeah.
And I think at the last update, I started to get a little bit concerned. I thought it might have been getting a bit silly, but
You did say that to me. You were like, ick a little bit about the episode. You weren't sure it really
yeah.
fitted in the
But then
whole vibe.
I went back and watched it again.
Mm,
Not the whole series, but just from that episode or an episode before, because I wasn't really paying attention at that stage. And no, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly
mm,
enjoyed the whole thing. And then because of finding out it's a spin-off from WandaVision,
yeah.
I then went and watched WandaVision, which I thought was actually a really clever series. They do a really good job. It's very
Tyler
smart.
loved WandaVision. He's tried to get me to watch it a few
I
times.
quite liked it. And yeah, the Agatha um connection in it is brilliant. And like they kind of model it's like they're saying that the Wicked Witch of the West is modeled off Agatha,
Right.
as her as a witch. And yeah, no, it was really clever and I loved how it tied together. Yes, I watched it backwards, but I don't think that really matters.
No, I think heaps
Um,
of people would go and watch WandaVision who've never watched Avenger any type of, Marvel before.
Yeah, but no, I rated both of them. I actually think I preferred Agatha over WandaVision, even though I really enjoyed WandaVision.
Yeah.
Just I think the theme of it, the
The
characters,
characters,
yeah,
yes.
and the style, and just because it's like the whole witches coven thing is really cool too.
Mm, mm.
Um, I'm praying. I know that WandaVision isn't getting a second season because I just don't think it fit in the story, but
Mm.
I'm praying Agatha does. Another thing I just started watching, because I'm just watching whatever I want at the moment while Vinny's away, and haven't watched
Love that for you.
any true crime. Kind of let that build up to when he comes back because then it's 2 episodes of true crime a night. Is a show on Prime, and I'm pretty sure it's a chick from Schitt's Creek, the sister.
Oh, I know the one. Is it What About Kevin or something like that?
Kevin can fuck
Kevin can
himself.
fuck himself. Yes,
And
yes.
what an interesting concept of a show. Have you seen or heard anything
Look, I
about it?
have. I remember reading something about it and going, "Ooh, I'm not sure that's for me." But then I've also heard people say it's really, really good. It gets really good reviews.
Yeah, so I'm only about 3 episodes in, to be fair. But it's so what it does is it's like it takes a spin on a sitcom. So you think about King of Queens, Everybody Loves Raymond, where the father is an absolute man child
Yeah,
and drives the wife to distraction all the time.
yeah.
You've seen Everybody Loves Raymond, right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Um, And so it has that whole sitcom vibe whenever Kevin's in the show. It's like you hear the studio audience laughing in the background and shit like that. It's all bright lights and whatnot and blah 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 and the zingers but as soon as he ends, it just turns into this sort of more darker sort of show. And it's her just losing her brain. She's sat on the fucking thing like fucking hell, Kevin. He's doing this, he's ruining my life. She's wanting to kill him and rada rada rada. And then when she goes back in and then Kevin's there, it goes back to the sitcom type of thing. As you could imagine, like in most normal situations, anyone that was married to a Ray Romano would want to fucking stab him in the face, kind of like
Yeah,
Family Guy type as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's actually really clever how they've done it, and I'm enjoying it thus far.
Oh, that actually does sound really interesting. I'm
Yeah,
really intrigued now. I like the idea of it being a sitcom and then it goes to
yeah, and they just do it really, really well. And the other thing you'll be very pleased to know today,
what
I
thing?
donated to Wikipedia.
Oh,
So for the very first time, I
nice.
was going on there and I was just getting a few more things to finish off my notes. And for the very first time, I got the
The
big
pop
thing,
up.
the big pop up.
Yeah,
I
right.
even added the 35 cent for admin fees. So I paid $3.10,
Nice.
please.
Nice. Yes, I had the admin fees. It's funny that you haven't got the pop-up
No.
before, and then I wonder if because it recognizes that I have donated before, it continues to give me the pop-up. But to be fair, I haven't seen it for a while. It used to come up quite often, even after actually, no, that's right. I went and closed it. I went and said, I don't want to see this anymore because I've donated before. And I gave it because
Right.
then it said to me, why are you closing this? And I gave feedback and I said, look, I
I've
do
already
give when
given.
I can. I
Yeah.
appreciate you sending it, popping it up like maybe once a year or twice a year or something
Yeah,
like
that's what I
that.
thought. I'll do it once a year.
But I'm not gonna. I actually think it's a little bit annoying to us for me all the time.
And then it's like, hey, sure you don't want to do like $1.70 a month?
Yeah, I
That's
know. I was
all.
like, fuck
I know.
no.
And it's funny because if someone at work was doing something, I'd be like, yeah, here's $20 towards your
Mm.
fundraising efforts. But this
Yeah,
is a
totally.
international thing. So I'm sure
Yeah.
my 270, my 310
But
is
think about
helping.
how much people actually commit to it. Like how many people go, oh fuck it, I'll give them $200.
Yeah.
There would be heaps of people who volunteer cash. I guarantee it.
Yeah, of course.
And
Of
if every
course.
person that uses it gives $3, that's a
They're
shit
making a
fucking ton
shit
of
ton.
money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I thought you'd be pleased with that. My very first donation. I kept the
I'm
receipt
very
too for a
proud.
I could claim it on my tax.
Nice one.
So should we get into our stories?
Mm.
Okay, so I have actually wanted to do this case for a while, or it's one I've seen and I thought, oh, this would be a good one to do.
Oh, this is
Um,
interesting. But is it one of those complex ones that is going to take forever with your notes?
oh, kind of. So it's one I'd seen a number of times in BuzzFeed articles, and I was always super intrigued in it. Like it piqued my interests, please.
Okay, okay.
It's one of those
Cut my
articles.
interest picked, please.
It's one of those cases, like one of those articles that was like cases that'll keep you awake at night type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you read shit, when you could get stuck in a wormhole if you're reading it, get stuck on the Wikipedia page. I've read it about it a couple of times. So I'm doing the 2017 Delphi Murders. Have you heard of it?
Delphi, like Delphy.
Oh, so
I-E.
close with an I, no E.
Do you know what? It does actually sound familiar, but I can't think of what it is.
Well, to be fair, I didn't know it by that name either at first. And when I started going
That
through
name
it,
sounds familiar.
yes, but when I start going through it, there are some parts that might ring a proverbial bell for you.
Okay,
But,
okay.
anyways, it's been in the news again recently, which is
Mm.
why I thought, oh, I'm doing it because there've been some advancements, but we'll get to that later. And
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not one of my gruesome ones. I still have one of those left for this season. I'll save that for the final True Crime Plus.
Beck. What's that going to be?
I don't know, but we're going to do a festive themed one because it's our last one in December, do you remember? So we're
Mm.
going to do like Christmas
Oh,
murders.
yeah, let me just make a note. I'll have to look that one up. Okay, I'm ready.
I think you were making a note. Was that you making your note, scratching your eye?
I was, no, I'm still doing it. I'm picking
You
up the
said,
pen now.
all
Here I am.
right.
I'm making a note on my pad.
I think you said, okay,
Christmas.
I'm making a note. Then you
I
scratched your eye.
was making a note, but I got
All right, I'm ready.
distracted by scratching my eye.
I thought that was you taking a note, mental note.
Shove it in my eye.
All right, so let's dive into the Delphi murders. This
Yeah.
case is a heartbreaking one and it had stumped investigators for years. It's about two best friends, Abigail Williams and Liberty German, also known as Abby and Libby Plith, who went out for a walk on a quiet afternoon and never came home on the 13th of February 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. A small, close-knit town where, as we hear so often, nothing like this ever happens. Abby was 13 years old. She was super creative, loved photography, and Libby was 14 years old, known for being outgoing and really smart. The two of them were great friends and were basically inseparable. That day, they were off from school because of a staff development day, so they decided to check out the Monon High Bridge Trail. So it's this old railway bridge that's now part of a hiking area. And in the pictures, it all looks beautiful, but there's a real eerie kind of feel about it when you look at them as well.
Mm-hmm.
The bridge is rickety and high up, and definitely not one for the faint-hearted, please. Vinny would shit himself.
As would I.
And
Ick.
it's kind of like the bridge in Stand By Me. And have you seen that movie?
Mm-hmm. I have indeed.
So you know the scene where the boys are crossing the train bridge and then the
Mm-hmm.
train starts coming when they're halfway
Yes.
across? It's like that kind of bridge.
Right.
Great movie, and I think I'm actually going to review that next season when we do
Mm.
those movie reviews again.
Yep. Yep.
Anywho, Libby's older sister, dropped them off at the trailhead at about 1:45 in the afternoon. They did the whole love you, bye, and the girls head off on their walk. The plan was pretty simple. They were out to explore, enjoy the day, and take some photos. Libby loved her phone and was always snapping pics. In fact, she posted a photo of Abby walking on the bridge that day at 2:07 p.m.
Mm.
It's the last confirmed sighting of them.
What year was this again?
2017. When they didn't show up at the pickup point at 3:15 p.m., so only 1.5 hours after they were dropped off, their family knew something wasn't right. They started calling their phones, but no one answered. By that evening, a search was underway. Friends, family, and volunteers all joined in, combing the area late into the night. At first, people thought maybe they just wandered off the trail or they'd gotten lost. It's easy to think when you're in the middle of the woods that could happen. But the next day, everything changed.
That's one of those situations where you honestly think there's a reasonable
They're okay.
explanation, right? You think something's happened. They've fallen, twisted an ankle, gotten stuck. It's only been an hour and a half that we
They're out
left
of
them.
range.
So they're not far. We will find them. It will
It's
be
gonna be
okay.
okay.
And you'd be
Yes.
trying not to really panic, but just saying they're going to be fine. I know they're
Keep it
okay.
together. Keep it together. They're going to be fine. Around noon on the 14th of February, searchers find their bodies in a wooded area about a half a mile from the bridge. Both girls had died from cuts to their neck from a serrated knife.
Oh my God.
And while there were no signs of sexual abuse or defensive wounds, and this is really weird, Abby's body was discovered fully clothed, but in Libby's clothes, while Libby was discovered nude. Abby's clothes were discovered in a nearby river. What's unsettling is that this was a spot that had apparently been searched the night before. So there's this lingering question of how did the searchers miss them, or were they even there at that time? And it's something that's never been fully explained.
And was it dark when they started searching?
So that was 3:15. It was probably about 5:30. It's February in Indiana. What's that? That's sort of wintry. So yeah, it was probably getting dark.
Mm.
And that's how it all started. A simple walk on a day off that turned into one of the most chilling cases in recent times. The discovery of their bodies devastated the town and left investigators scrambling for answers.
Oh,
But here's
imagine finding those
yeah,
bodies, though.
two of them. But here's where things take an even darker turn. Libby had the presence of mind to record something on her phone before they were attacked. That recording has been critical in this case, and it's really amazing that in what must have been an absolutely terrifying moment for the young girl, she had the nous to hit record, providing one of the most significant pieces of evidence in this case that came from her phone. At some point during their hike, Libby managed to capture a picture of a man walking towards them on the Monon High Bridge.
I remember this part, yeah.
Yes, the image is grainy. It's an older phone camera, but you can clearly see this guy in jeans, a navy jacket, and a cap. He's walking with purpose, his head down and his hands in his pockets. And it's unsettling to say the least when you see the picture. I'll use it in our promos. So my next line was, does this ring any bells for you at all?
It does now, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm guessing he was either yelling out to them at this point to wait or whatever, and they started freaking out. So she's taken a pic. But that's not all. There's also some audio in another clip. In another recording, you can hear a man's voice saying, down the hill. And that's it, just those 3 words. But those words, combined with the photo, became a central focus on the investigation. So just to reiterate how smart and brave Libby, at just 14 years old, was to have the quick thinking to document this moment, knowing something's not right. That decision has been critical to the case, and honestly, it's one of the reasons we all know as much as we do today. So when the police released the photo and the audio clip to the public, it's like a bombshell. Everyone wanted to help figure out who this man was. Thousands of tips start pouring in, people dissecting every little detail in the photo, from his posture to his clothes. The voice clips played over and over again on the news, with people speculating about the accent, the tone, all that shit. But even with all of this, the identity of the man isn't immediately clear.
It's still an image with the guy with the hat on. Like, yes,
Looking
you can
down.
get like a build from it, but you probably couldn't even get hair color, right?
Well, and it was so grainy as well because it's an old school photo. But even with all this, the identity of the man wasn't immediately clear. The police called him Bridge Guy. And that became his nickname in the media for years. And this image and voice were all investigators had to go on. So it's also worth mentioning how much work went into following up on those tips. So the police combed through every lead, interviewing potential suspects, running down dead ends, and trying to piece together a timeline of what happened. But for a long time, the question lingered: who's the man on the bridge and what happened in the moments after that recording? After the release of the audio clip and photo of Ridgway, the investigation in Delphi Murders kicked into overdrive. Law enforcement were all in, so it had the involvement of the local police, the Indiana State Police, and the FBI all
I was going
working
to
on the
say they'd
case.
have to be involved, the FBI. There's
Despite their efforts,
kids.
though, yeah, exactly, and because of how much media attention it's getting,
Mm,
but despite their efforts, though, they knew that this was never going to be an easy one. The area where Abby and Libby were found is rural and it's secluded, so investigators had to navigate rough terrain while combing the scene for clues. And on top of that, it wasn't a case where they had a clear suspect from the start, so there's no obvious connection between the girls and the man in the picture. One of the biggest challenges early on was sifting through the sheer volumes of tips that the police were getting. And as I said, we're talking tens of thousands of calls and emails from people who thought they recognized the man on the bridge or knew something about the case. And forensic experts examined the audio and photo, trying to pull out any extra details like his age, his height, or even the type of jacket he's wearing and shit like that. No matter how much evidence they collect, it was still very vague.
mm.
Investigators said that they had some DNA from the scene, but it's not enough, again, to directly identify anyone, which is a huge blow because normally DNA can totally crack cases wide open, right? But here it's just another piece of a confusing puzzle.
So there was DNA.
There was a little bit of DNA that they had, but it mustn't have been enough to be able to link to anybody.
Right.
The community, though, were very determined to help. The town of Delphi rallied behind the girls' families, holding vigils, fundraisers, and walks in their memory. There's posters everywhere with wanted written underneath the grainy photo of Bridge Guy. People wear t-shirts and bracelets that said justice for Abby and Libby. So everyone's getting fully involved to make shit happen
Mm.
here.
And imagine the tips coming through.
Yeah.
It could be my neighbor. He's tall
He's a
and
bit of a weirdo.
thin,
Or
and yeah,
yeah,
he
this looks
wears
like
baseball caps. Like.
exactly. And just anyone. And I think sometimes with those tips, people will be like, if they've had a bad feeling about their neighbor, even though they might
Mm,
not look at them, they'll just ring it in and just say, it's definitely him and shit.
yeah.
One of the most talked about moments in the case comes a few months later. So in July 2017, when the police released a composite sketch of the suspect. The sketch was based on witness accounts of someone that they saw in the area that day. It showed a white
Sure.
man with a slightly younger appearance than the grainy photo suggested, with longer hair and no hat.
Mm,
But then here's the thing. So 2 years later in 2019, the police released another sketch and it's completely fucking different. This new
mm.
image is of a man who looked older and had shorter hair, and it's just confused everyone at this point. So
I
suddenly
must have seen the one with the younger man because in my mind, when you were talking about him, I was thinking it was a
a
younger
younger
man.
man,
So
yeah.
I must have seen the younger sketch.
So this has thrown everyone because at one stage you're all focusing and trying to find this type of person, and now it's someone who's
Mm.
completely different. And
But they
so,
say anytime that you interview like a witness, people's memories are clouded by their perception as well and their
yeah,
opinions and things like that.
and
So
your
when you,
brain fills in blanks.
yeah, so when you have to sit down and think about something, it's not very accurate or isn't always accurate. And no,
Yeah, you
no
have
by
to,
no fault of the person.
of course, yeah, you have to take some of it with a grain of salt, I guess.
Mm.
So now people are wondering, are there two suspects, or did the investigation just take a completely new direction? And the sketches weren't the only frustrating part. So police also hinted that they had more evidence, but they weren't ready to release it yet, which left the public feeling like they're in the dark. Rumors swirled,
Mm.
theories popped up on forums, and amateur sleuths started dissecting every
Mm.
detail of the case.
But they
Some of the
say that too, don't they? Just to say that they've got other evidence to scare them people and be like, there's more, we're coming for you.
Yeah, so I'd sort of touch on that a bit in the later as well, what I think they do that for. But some of the theories were helpful, but others just added to the noise, as they often do. And I love how social media has birthed the internet sleuths in members of the
Mm.
public. Like you see so many documentaries,
Mm.
documentaries on how internet sleuths have helped crack cases around the world. Have you ever seen Don't Fuck with Cats on Netflix?
I haven't, but I know of it. Everyone, I remember when it came out and
It
everyone
was
was talking about
huge.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we watched it. I think we were in it was either just before we were going over to Ireland, or we watched it over there, and it's fucking
Mm.
brilliant. Like it's
I'm pretty sure you were in Ireland because I'm pretty sure you messaged me from Ireland saying you need to watch
watch
this. And
it.
I was like,
Yeah.
please.
Oh, I totally recommend it. It's a real wild ride, that one. And just shows the power of people coming together and sort of staying up late and trying to
Mm,
crack shit on their own free time.
mm.
Anywho, law enforcement faced a lot of criticism during this time. People were questioning why it's taking so long to find the man in the photo, why they weren't releasing more information, but the police stood firm, saying they had to protect the integrity of the case. So this is going back to what you were saying earlier, which I totally get what you mean as well, and I get why they hold some of the information. It's like, so if they don't release some information and then one of the witnesses or a suspect slips up and says something that only the killer would know,
Yeah.
then they've got a strong lead.
Well, it's the same with the Idaho college murders.
Yeah.
So they've apparently got all this evidence against him, but they will not say what it is until it goes to trial. They won't
Yes.
give it up
Because I can't.
because they don't want to. They say they don't want to, impact the legitimacy of the
The
case
case.
against
Yeah.
him, which
And then it
totally makes
gives
sense.
totally, because then it also gives the opportunity for the perp or the suspect to create stories as to how that's why that couldn't be attached to them, or do you know
I
what I
need to
mean?
research that and see what's happening in that
I know, I was
case.
just thinking that when you said that. I did watch a special of it on TV months ago, just
Did
after you did
you?
it.
I don't
It
know
was
if I
on
watched this special.
Fox. Um, but yeah, because then it gives them an opportunity to come up with a reason as to why that bit of information or evidence is the way it is.
Yeah, and you're
Whereas
playing
if
your
they're
hand, right? You're showing your cards.
exactly. So, despite the challenges, there were moments that gave the families and the community hope. Every now and then, the police would hold press conferences to remind everyone that they weren't giving up. They made it clear that someone out there knew something and they just needed the right tip to crack the case. So, they're still showing that they're still investigating, letting them know that they haven't forgotten about it. So, after 5 years of searching, in October 2022, Indiana State Police announced they had arrested a man in connection with the murders. His name is Richard Allen. I wasn't aware of this either, by the way. I remember seeing that. So it must have been before 2022. I'd seen the BuzzFeed things because I didn't know
Mm,
someone had been arrested.
mm.
But now here's the thing that really shook people. So Delphi, as we know, is a small town, and this man had been living there the entire time. Richard Allen wasn't some shadowy figure hiding in the woods or an outsider that wandered into Delphi that day, a vagabond or whatever they call those traveler type people. He was a member of the community. He was a
Mm.
husband, a father. He worked at the local CVS pharmacy, so people knew him. He had even developed photos for Libby's family after her death at the pharmacy.
How old was he?
He is, so at that stage he was 50, but at the time he would have been 47.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine the shock of for the people who knew him or had crossed paths with him in everyday life,
Mm.
finding out he's responsible for this thing, this huge case in their little town, and he's the guy. Alan's name wasn't new to the investigation, however, and he'd actually been interviewed back in 2017, not long after the murders. But it turns out he admitted to being on the Monon High Bridge Trail that day, but for whatever reason, he wasn't flagged as a suspect back. But for whatever reason, he wasn't flagged as a suspect back then. Maybe due to the overwhelming number of tips, or maybe there wasn't enough evidence at the time to pin on him, and they just thought it was just there was
Maybe he was a
probably
family man and a pillar of the
community
community, and they just
exactly,
didn't think that he would be capable of that.
and there was probably a few people on the bridge that day as well.
Mm.
But as the investigation progressed, his name came up again, and this time it sticks. So police searched his home. They reportedly found items that linked him to the crime scene.
No.
And as you could imagine, the arrest was a massive relief for the families of Abby and Libby. But it also raised new questions. How had he managed to stay under the radar so long? Was he acting alone? Was someone else involved? And the community is still grappling with these unanswered questions at that time.
And why? What?
And
What
why?
is he just a sicko? Is it, did he lose his marbles? Like,
What
why?
was the motive? One of the most emotional moments came during the press conference announcing his arrest. The lead investigator speaks directly to the family, saying, Today is not the day to celebrate, but the day will come when we can. And at this point, it was just about the first step towards justice. Finally, they have a name and a face tied to the horrors of that day and on the Monon High Bridge. And one of the key pieces of evidence that the police found and were able to tie to Alan was a bullet. During their investigation, police found an unspent round near the girls' bodies. This bullet has unique markings, likely from being ejected or cycled through a gun. So you know how like they get that
Mm,
scratches on it or some shit. I don't know
mm.
exactly how it works. Never really fired a gun. When investigators examined it, they were able to trace those markings back to a firearm that Richard Allen owned. And when they linked his gun to the bullet at the crime scene years later, that's when things all start falling into place. There was also digital evidence. Police had been meticulously piecing together Allen's movements from cell phone data and surveillance footage, and they were able to track his location on the day of the murders and were able to find inconsistencies then with his story. Then there were statements that Allen had made over the years. It's reported that he made comments to people that raised eyebrows, like talking about the case in a way that seemed unusual or overly interested. People in Delphi started recalling things he'd said or done, and now in hindsight, they're able to go,
Mm.
oh, it felt a bit off. For example, he would bring up the case in conversations almost obsessively, even though most people in town were trying to respect the victims' families and not talk about it. There were also reports of him making comments about the case that seemed to suggest he knew more than the public knew, such as, I don't know, I know what happened to those girls, but it's not what people think. He even had strange
What the
interactions.
fuck?
I know. He even had strange interactions with law enforcement, offering unsolicited opinions on the case, and some friends recalled him being oddly eager to talk about the murders in detail. His wife also later mentioned how he'd seemed overly interested in the case, often watching news coverages and reading articles about it. So, years after uncertainty and waiting, the trial of Richard Allen's reaches its conclusion on Monday, the 11th of November, 2024. Just last week, please.
Oh my God. So did he plead guilty or not guilty?
So he pleaded not guilty. The
Right.
prosecutors had enough evidence to convince a jury to find Allen guilty of the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Allen's convicted on 2 counts of murder, along with 2 additional counts of murder while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. At 52 years old, Allen faces a potential sentence of up to 130 years in prison when he is sentenced on the 20th of December 2024. So he hasn't been sentenced yet. He gets sentenced at the end of this year. Outside the courthouse, there were obvious huge cheers from the community. As for Allen, during the delivery of the verdict, he showed no emotion, though he did look back at his family at one point. His attorneys left the courthouse without making any statements, and the judge has kept a gag order in place, likely until sentencing, to ensure the trial's integrity remains intact.
So still no understanding of the motive?
No real. So people have spoken about, and I mean, this is something again that comes out of a lot of these sort of cases. Um, like a
Crime of opportunity,
well,
like.
no, satanic worshipping, like an old Norse type thing.
Mm.
Richard Allen.
Well, see, when you were talking about the change of clothes, I was going to say it's almost like a bunch of high school kids. Like it's almost like a bunch of kids are responsible, teenagers or something like that. Like it just seems like a joke that they were playing that maybe went too far because it's just not something usually, especially with no signs of sexual assault. Like,
Sold. Yeah. But then when you've got the photo and then the voice of him saying down the hill,
mm.
and see, they would have done
Well,
so
that,
much
yeah,
work
no,
on matching
totally,
voices.
yeah. And look, they've got him anyway. I mean, if they've got the ballistics for the gun, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they had some other evidence there, right? That would have convicted him. But I think it's also hard when it's children.
Yeah.
Juries can be swayed. They want to find the murderer, don't they?
Let me just see if who is Richard Allen? What is Odinism? Here we go. So this is one of the theories that they're saying about why he killed him, Odinism. In a lengthy filing last year, Allen's defense team said the teens were killed in a ritual sacrifice by people affiliated with the pagan Norse religion known as Odinism that has been embraced by white nationalists. Um, absolutely nothing links Alan to Odinism or any religious cult. So that's what the defense is saying, that he didn't do it. He's pleaded not guilty, and that it was some white nationalists have done it in a ritual called Odinism, and he's
But
getting
still, they
pinned
have
with
to
it
have again some sort of evidence to
to
support
prove
that
that.
theory.
Yeah.
Can't just pull it. You can say, "Oh, well, the aliens came and did it." Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just say that without any type of evidence.
It has to do with the serrated knife and the wounds on their neck as well.
Mm,
That's got to do with it. But yeah.
okay, yeah, maybe.
But I mean, if they've got these record excuse me, this recording of his
Mm,
voice, you'd imagine they're able to match that together and
yeah,
shit.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really sad. Those poor little girls.
I'm just really glad it got solved because
Yes.
I remember, well, we hope it's the correct solving and some
Mm,
guy's not been pinned for it. But I do remember, as I said, just reading and seeing those pictures and hearing that recording of his voice and just being, fuck, man, those poor
it was
girls.
very like eerie, wasn't it? And creepy.
Mm,
It was like, oh my God.
yeah. And the video with the recording, I'm sure there's video footage of where you just see the sticks as they're walking down. And he's
Mm,
obviously leading them down. And it's sad because there's a lot of, when you're that age as well, and you're in those situations when you have someone in authority, which is always an older person, telling you to do something, you do it.
of
Like even
course
if
you
it goes
would.
against
Absolutely.
your judgment, you're just like, oh, okay, rah,
And you
rah,
would be too naive to ever think of it to go the way that it went. Do you know what
that
I
it was
mean?
going to
Like, you
go
would
that way.
never think that. You would just be thinking they're like, playing a weird joke or,
Yeah, or you're going to
you
get in
know,
trouble or
just a bit
something.
creepy. Like, you
Yeah.
wouldn't really understand what was happening at all. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the Green River Killer
Oh, it's
tonight.
a big one.
It is a big one, and I did bite off a little bit more than I can chew. And I didn't realize how big it was because I just read a bit of a synopsis. I had actually, unbelievably, had not really heard about it. There's lots
Wow.
of familiar aspects of the case now that I've looked at it. But at the time, and there's something I'll talk about right at the end that is a tiny bit familiar. And I wonder if it's familiar for you. But when I messaged you and said that I was doing it, and you were like, "Oh, that's a big one." I was like, "Oh, fuck, is it?" I didn't realize. But I'd already started watching a documentary on it. So I've watched a couple of documentaries on it. And it is a big one.
Mm,
And I think I've done okay. I
I'm
think
sure you do well.
the ending's a little bit tricky because I watched a second documentary on it today. And didn't realize it was a fucking TV series, did I? So I was trying to catalog some
Oh,
of the
right.
specific murders based on what I already knew and based on what this documentary was. And then I was like, I've only got 5 more minutes. Are they going to wrap it all up and just give me some extra content? And then it wrapped up and they fucking only talked about the first 5 murders. So I was like, oh my God, giving me nothing extra. I could have spent this whole time researching.
Well, he does a lot of murders, so you'll be forgiven for not covering them
He
all.
does, yes. It's definitely impossible to do
Yeah,
them all. So I won't be doing that. I'll be touching on some,
yeah.
some general information. Okay, so it was 1982, the year my baby sister was born, plus
Oh,
a year filled with remarkable events that left a mark on history. Here in Brisbane, Australia, excitement filled the air as the Commonwealth Games brought athletes and spectators from
oh,
across the
yes.
globe to our doorstep.
That was Matilda,
No, that
the
was
winking
88, wasn't it?
kangaroo.
Oh, was that 82?
Yeah,
Oh,
88 was
okay.
Expo.
Yeah, yeah, okay. It was a proud moment for our city and country, showcasing Australia's spirit and love for sport on an international stage. Meanwhile, across the world, technology and entertainment were evolving in groundbreaking ways. In Japan, the first ever compact disc was released, revolutionizing the way people listen to music. This little shiny disc would go on to change the music industry forever, setting the stage for the digital revolution. I wouldn't say
Just
it's
tying a little
changed
pop culture
forever. I
into a
know.
crime task.
I wouldn't say it changed forever because no one uses CDs anymore, but
Yeah, this is true.
still.
And
Cinema,
everyone's going back to records.
that's it, that's it. And Spotify Plus. Um, Cinema also had its moments of glory that year with E.T. the Extraterrestrial
I was going to
capturing
say E.T.
hearts worldwide. Steven Spielberg's touching tale of a friendship between a boy and a stranded alien became a cultural phenomenon. blending sci fi wonder with deeply human emotions. On the music front, Michael Jackson released Thriller, a masterpiece that broke records and became the best selling album of all time. However, while many celebrated these uplifting moments, darker events unfolded elsewhere. In Washington state, USA, authorities were beginning to piece together evidence of a horrifying series of crimes. A shadow loomed over the region as they realized that one of the most prolific and dangerous serial killers in American history was at large. Dubbed the Green River Killer, this individual would eventually be linked to the murders of dozens of women, making him the second deadliest serial killer in US history. The grim reality of his crimes continues to haunt investigators, with the potential for even more victims to be identified as forensic advancements uncover new connections.
Mhm.
So, you know, obviously, quite a bit about it.
I know of him, yes. And I
Okay.
watched episodes of him.
Oh, so how many documentaries have you watched on him?
And there's one big specific one that's on, I don't know if it's on Hey You or on Netflix, Foxtel, but like we've seen true crime episodes that are about him.
Mm,
I
mm,
couldn't put a number on it.
okay. Probably talk about some of that stuff. So it was August 15th, 1982. It was a calm Sunday, and a man decided to spend his day off exploring the tranquil waterways of Washington state in his small boat. As he navigated the meandering channels, he ventured further into the shallows than he typically would, captivated by the stillness of the landscape. Drifting along, his eyes were drawn to a peculiar shape in the water ahead. It looked out of place, almost like a mannequin.
Oh, God.
Intrigued
Yeah.
but uneasy, he paddled closer, peering through the murky green water to get a better look. As his boat neared the figure, a chill ran down his spine. What he had mistaken for a mannequin was no lifeless stored display. He could now see a face, pale and contorted, emerging from the depths.
Oh,
Nearby, another face appeared beneath the rippling surface.
oh, Jesus.
Horrified, he realized he was looking at the lifeless bodies of two women submerged just beneath his boat. His heart pounding, the man quickly paddled back to shore and frantically contacted authorities.
That would be the fucking worst because automatically you would think, well, I would think in that situation, oh my God, I'm going to get murdered because the person's around, or they're going to blame me.
Yeah. And look, there's speculation that he actually saw the killer on the banks of the water, because there's a guy who said to the so these were the first two victims that were found. And there was this guy on the river edge, and he was swimming, and he sort of yelled out to the guys like, "Oh, you know, the guy who was in the boat yelled out to a guy that was walking along the river, you caught anything?" Thinking that he was out for like the same purposes that he was.
Yeah.
And the guy turned around and said, "No, no, but you know, there's a interesting looking engine over there," and pointed him in a different direction. And the boatman's like,
Right.
"Oh, whatever," went in the same way that he was going, and then found the bodies. And he wondered afterwards if it was the
The
killer
guy. Yeah.
sending him in a different direction. So he didn't find the bodies. But I feel like through all the research, he always wanted the bodies found. Like it was always, he was never, he was hiding them, but he knew that they would eventually come out. Like
Yeah.
he never really
And
meant
they're
for them
just
to
below the
stay
surface,
uncovered.
as you said. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So he never really expected them to stay hidden forever. He always wanted them to come out. But
Well,
whether
that's
or
what
not that
serial
was
killers
him,
want too, isn't it? Notoriety
exactly.
and shit like that. Their
That's it.
ego.
And that's part of this case is just how the frequency of the kills
Mm,
and the frequency of how they were finding the bodies is
yeah.
just mind blowing. And these poor people investigating this case must have just been like I don't even know how they would have slept at night. It would have been
Mm,
fucked up. Okay, so where was I? So investigators arrived swiftly, descending on the bank of the Green River. What they encountered would become the first chilling chapter in one of the United States' most notorious serial murder cases. The bodies of two women, both naked, had been dumped in the river and pinned down by large rocks to ensure they stayed hidden beneath the water. Upon examination, it became clear that the women had been strangled, likely killed before their bodies were discarded. The rocks had not only been placed on top of them, but had also been shoved into their vaginal cavities, a grotesque detail that investigators struggled to understand.
mm.
The reasoning behind this horrific act remains a mystery, as no psychological or forensic explanation ever fully emerged. After days of tireless efforts to identify the victims, the women were confirmed to be two known sex workers, 17-year-old Cynthia Hines and 31-year-old Marsha Chapman. Both women had been reported missing, their fates unknown until the discovery in the Green River. Now, Marsha will go on to be one of the oldest. I think there's another one who's 35, but the majority of these women are between 14 and 20.
Bloody hell.
And there's a lot of them. The grisly find marked the beginning of an investigation that would span decades. These murders were the first confirmed kills of the Green River Killer, a predator who would terrorize the region, targeting vulnerable women, primarily sex workers.
Yeah.
Enter the newly promoted lead detective, David Reichart, who was assigned to investigate the gruesome crimes unfolding in King County, Washington. Reichart, deeply disturbed by the discovery of the first two victims in the Green River, took it upon himself to comb the surrounding area for clues. He hoped to find evidence pointing to the killer's movements, but what he found instead was even more harrowing: a third body.
Yeah.
So they found two in the water. They're just doing the scene, and then he's
Trying
having
to
a bit of a
find.
look
Yeah.
and fucking finds another one.
Yeah. It's like fucking the backpack murder, Ivan Milat, when they just went to look for clues and then body after body just turns up.
Reichart called out to his colleagues with urgency and disbelief. The team rushed to his location and found another victim lying in the underbrush near the riverbank. The young woman, later identified as 16-year-old Opal Mills, had been brutally murdered. Now, as I talk through some of the earlier victims, and like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, I do talk about who they were, but a lot of them they didn't identify them until much, much later either. Sometimes it took a long time for them to find out actually who they were, because they were runaways. And
that's what I was going to say. And a lot of the times they
80s.
wouldn't have known, wouldn't had record of missing people because they were run away. So they wouldn't have names to attach them to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And part of the issues that they say throughout this case, and what caused multiple problems for the investigators, was that because they were sex workers, no one was reporting them missing. So they didn't know who was missing at any time, because no one was going, oh, hey, they haven't come home, because there was no one waiting for them to come home half the time. So they didn't know they were gone.
Well, look at the bloody fucking pig farmer.
Oh, yeah,
Same thing.
exactly. That's exactly the same thing. So Opal Mills had been brutally murdered. Like the others, she was naked, had been strangled, her own pants used around her neck. This grim discovery deepened the team's suspicions that they were dealing with a serial killer. Reviewing the evidence, Reichart and his colleagues uncovered a chilling pattern. Just a month earlier, in July 1982, the body of 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield had been found floating face down in the Green River. Wendy, a runaway with a troubled past, had also been strangled with her pants. Her case, initially thought to be an isolated tragedy, now appeared to be connected to the others. The body count was rising rapidly. A week before, August 15th, another woman, 23-year-old Deborah Bonner, had been found dead near the Green River. Like Wendy and Opal, Deborah had been strangled and discarded in the same general area. Investigators were struck by the killer's brazen escalation: 5 murders in the span of just 30 days.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about this later, but the majority of them were in 1982 and 1983. And I won't go into the total amount just yet. I'll save that for the end, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Each of the victims shared several tragic commonalities. They were all young, vulnerable women, many of whom lived on the margins of society. Wendy and Opal were runaways. Marsha and Cynthia were known sex workers. Deborah Bonner, too, had struggled to make ends meet, resorting to sex work to survive. Most of the victims had few people who knew their whereabouts or were actively looking out for them, making them easy targets for a predator who seemed to know exactly how to exploit their vulnerabilities. All women were also known to frequent the Strip, a stretch of road between Tacoma and Seattle known for its seedy nightlife. For Detective Reichart and the investigative team, the case was quickly becoming overwhelming. They were now dealing with 5 murders in close succession, all within the vicinity of the Green River. The killer was methodical. Methodical.
It's hard, isn't it? When you start reading and then a word comes up, you're like, I can't say that.
It's different when you write it as opposed to when you actually say it. Calculating, and when you say it aloud, like in your head as well.
Yeah.
The killer
Documentaries.
was methodical, calculating, and clearly intent on continuing his spree. Reichardt realized they weren't just hunting a murderer, they were in a race against time to stop a predator before more women fell victim to his twisted compulsion. The weight of the investigation pressed heavily on his shoulders. As the newly promoted lead detective, he was determined to piece together the evidence they had and prevent further bloodshed. This was only the beginning of a long, grueling battle for justice. Detectives are stumped, even with a detailed victim profile and a perceived understanding of the motivations driving the perpetrator. They had little or no evidence that pointed them in new directions. DNA testing was extremely unsophisticated and unreliable in the early 80s. The
Yeah.
killer was not slowing down, though. Despite authorities pursuing every lead, he continued to take his next victims at an alarming rate.
So he was, even after the bodies were found, he was still then killing and going and going and going.
Go, 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 go. And then he did change a lot of the locations. So there was various locations over the years, and some bodies they didn't find until 20 years
Yes.
later, and
Yeah.
some they found but they didn't link to the case.
Yeah.
And again, without giving away, because there's a few suspects in it.
Yeah.
There was a long region as well where he was active, so
Mm.
they weren't always linked back.
Went in different jurisdictions and shit like that.
Yes, exactly. um With 25 officers, the King County Sheriff's Department formed the Green River Killer Task Force and reached out to the FBI for support. They profiled the suspect in great detail, but this does not uncover any further possibilities except taxi driver Melvin Foster,
Mm-hmm.
a huge weirdo who used to drive around the strip offering protection to the girls by telling them they should come and stay with him for a while and he would keep them safe. He was even known to have some of the victims in his car previously. He came under police scrutiny by making anonymous tip-offs saying they should be looking at cab drivers. And surprise, all his personal characteristics exactly fit the FBI profiling. Although the girls on the strip just referred to him as creepy. Police decide to interview him as a witness, not a suspect, and Foster attends excitedly, admitting he knew all of the victims and that they all looked up to him. The interview becomes intense after Foster fails a polygraph test. They then search his car, finding women's underwear and pornographic photos. His story continues to change, but they have no further evidence to hold him after questioning. Authorities put him under 24-hour surveillance. Like, I think this is just a sign of the times as well that they can't hold on to them, like, because
Yeah.
there's nothing that links them, because it was before the digital age, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there was nothing that they could do to just keep them and be like, we actually want to keep you until we can investigate this because we think we've got the guy.
And this guy is just potentially in his own head, just is an internet sleuth, but not an internet sleuth. He's just loving the attention and
Just a fucking loser.
yeah, a creep, if you will.
So Foster finds out about the surveillance and goes to the media claiming harassment from the police.
Yeah, he just wants his time in the limelight.
Ick. It's the 25th of September 1982, and Melvin Foster is still under surveillance when another body is found in an abandoned lot near Seattle Airport in some blackberry bushes. She's been strangled with some men's socks, naked, with a distinctive bird tattoo on her chest. Her name is later revealed to be 17-year-old Giselle Lavaughn. She's from an upper middle class family, more privileged than any of the victims so far, but had found herself in Seattle with her boyfriend after rebelling and running away from home to follow the Grateful Dead tour, which led to prostitution to support herself and her boyfriend. Stand up bloke right there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was determined from the date she went missing that she is likely the second Green River killer victim, not the sixth.
Wow. Yeah.
And killed when Melvin Foster was not under surveillance. And despite no more bodies being uncovered, the reports of missing girls continued to grow at an alarming rate. So they found her, she was the sixth body that they found, but she had been there for a while.
Yes.
And so considering those first two bodies were found, they were the third and fourth, I think, or this. Yes, they ended up being the third and fourth because there was one before and then there was this. Actually, I think they were the fourth and fifth. Sorry, I think they were the fourth and fifth because some of these girls were earlier than that.
Yeah. And what was the, or do you get to this, the actual frequency in which it was happening? Do they know like it was one a month or one every?
I've got a couple of things that I refer to, but not overall. It would
Okay.
have been too hard to calculate based on
Oh,
because it's really
yes.
time missing and then the location and then when they found the bodies.
Yeah.
So they don't always have a
It's
ton
not
of
all
death on them.
sequential. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And when they're in the water as well, that fucks up with a lot of DNA. Well, even though they wouldn't have had DNA, but it fucks up with a lot of evidence and
Yeah, yeah. Well, I couldn't find anything that published time of death anyway. It was all just date they went missing, date they were found.
found. Yep.
So I think in some cases they might have been able to determine time of death, but in a lot of cases they wouldn't have been able
But we're
to.
just basically date of missing is date of
Considered.
death,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah, because he didn't hold on to them for very long.
Yeah.
He
He
pretty
wasn't
much killed
torturing
them
him
on the
and
spot. It was
yeah,
just pick them up, kill them, dump them.
do his shit, kill him. Yeah.
Um So later in 1982, police review eyewitness statements with several reporting a man in a pickup truck engaging with women matching the victims' profiles. Gary Ridgway, a truck painter, was known to frequent areas where sex workers worked, and his vehicle matched descriptions provided by witnesses. So now we've got two suspects. We've got Melvin Foster, and now we're bringing in Gary Ridgway. He had also been seen with women fitting the victim profiles, raising suspicions among investigators. Ridgway was questioned by police in 1982 after a sex worker reported that he had tried to solicit her. At the time, he denied any wrongdoing and claimed he was simply looking for companionship. He was cooperative and allowed the police to search his truck, but nothing incriminating was found during this initial interaction. Ridgway's occupation as a truck painter gave him flexibility and access to areas where bodies were later found. He lived and worked near the Green River, placing him close to the crime scenes. Despite this, there was no direct physical evidence tying him to the murders in 1982. Investigators administered a polygraph test to Ridgway in the early 1980s, which he passed. This gave police reason to deprioritize him as a suspect at the time, though he remained on their radar.
Yeah. And those polygraph tests can be beaten.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Melvin Foster is still the prime suspect, and the police issue a second search warrant over his property. He immediately flees to the press, who interview him live. He famously makes things worse for himself when asked, "Did you murder all these girls?" He responds with, "No, but I wish I did," covering this slight by repeating, "I wish I did know who did." Fucking
Oh, yeah,
weirdo.
yeah, yeah,
Have
yeah.
you seen that bit in the
Yeah.
documentaries?
Yeah.
He's like, "No, I wish I did. I
I
wish I
wish I
did
knew.
know who did it."
Yeah.
Like, out of desperation and without the luxury of the digital world of computers or the internet, investigators turned to some unorthodox methods of determining new theories, recruiting a respected serial killer hunter, Robert Keppel. Do you know what they went and did?
Who's they?
So sorry, the investigators have gone to recruit. So they're pursuing some unorthodox methods of trying to figure out
Yeah.
new theories because they were
So they've
absolutely stumped in 1984.
gone to ask another serial killer, what would you be involved in?
Yes.
How would you?
Can you
So
guess who it was?
who they asked?
Mm,
Not Edmund Kemp.
mm-mm.
No, fucking yes, the most prolific one, the good-looking guy that fucks went back and rooted their dead bodies.
Ted
What
Bundy.
Ted Bundy, that's it, yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say before that?
There's a show on Netflix. They've only done 2 seasons and it drives me insane that they haven't done a third one yet for it called Mindhunter. And it's got your man from Glee that Rachel loved.
Yes. Yes. I know the one.
And it's
Tyler's
based
watched a bit, I think.
it's excellent. It's based on a
Mm,
true story of how they were trying to find out what made the FBI enlisted these two guys to go and find out what made serial killers tick to try and see
mm,
if you're born evil, basically, or if it's environmental. And they
mm,
interview all these big serial killers. It's very interesting.
mm.
You
Yeah,
should
I know
watch
the
that.
one. I would actually watch it. I would totally watch it.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so they were completely stumped. It was a couple of years in. Bodies were piling up. By this point, I think there was somewhere in excess of 20 girls that they had
Yeah.
found killed within the same manner. And they were desperate.
Over
Uh,
how long of a period is that?
So the most active years was 82 and 83. 82 was the worst, but 83 comes a close session. So I'm pretty sure there was like over 20 between 20 and 25 in 82, and then
Jesus.
83 was slightly less, like maybe 19ish, and then it
Ah,
goes up.
just like one a fortnight is just going out and just fucking on
And imagine
average.
being the investigators finding them and not having any
Any
evidence or
idea?
any clue of how to
Yeah.
find this madman, and just constantly just finding these dead girls everywhere. Like it's just, and we were quite young then, so I don't remember this, but there's a key piece I'm going to save till the end that I want that you're going to be fascinated by. I hope you don't know about
Oh,
it.
okay.
Okay, so where was I? Yeah, so they were desperate. So they engaged the FBI serial killer hunter, who was involved in the case with Ted Bundy. And so he and Dave Reichart, so the head of the investigation, they periodically interviewed Ted Bundy while he was incarcerated. So Bundy offered his opinions on the psychology and motivations and behavior of the killer. He suggested that the killer was revisiting the dump sites to have sex with his victims, which turned out to be true. And if police found a fresh grave, they should stake it out and wait for him to come back.
Ugh.
But it was funny because the
Right.
comparison
Yeah.
between Bundy's victims compared to the Green River killers, these were all vulnerable women who didn't have homes or didn't,
Mm.
have anyone looking out for them. Whereas Bundys were all like college
Co-ed.
girls off
Yeah.
the beach on, spring
Yeah.
break. And
Because he had that, he was so charismatic and attractive, which I
that's
don't even
right.
think he was that attractive.
No, ick.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, whilst they could talk to him about why his motivations and stuff like that would never be entirely accurate because the victim
Yeah.
profile was different too.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so from 1983 onwards, the Green River murders escalated. The pattern of targeting vulnerable women, primarily sex workers and runaways, continued unabated, leaving law enforcement struggling to keep up with the growing body count. So 1984 and 1985 saw 21 new victims located that were killed during the previous years. Despite the victims' bodies being found over an almost 20-year period, it is believed that 1982 was when the majority of these young victims' lives were taken.
Mm.
So they kept finding bodies in 1984 and 1985, but the majority of those were
Murdered
murdered in
earlier.
82, 83. So he did
Yeah.
seem to, be very, very active for a couple of years and then taper off.
Yeah.
But that's based on an assumption because it's hard to say how many people he's killed still to this day.
And was there certain significant events in his life that were occurring at that time that made him unable to commit these murders?
Well, we
You
haven't
know,
talked about who the killer is yet, have we? Because we've got two suspects.
oh, okay, yes.
So during 1986, more and more bodies were discovered in remote locations, and some remained unidentified for years. And investigators continued to struggle with forensic technology, and the sheer volume of cases and tips continued to overwhelm the task force, despite it being increased to 60 officers. So it went
Fuck.
from 25 full time, and at its peak, it had 60 full time officers working it just to keep up with the phone calls that they were getting and the sightings and the
Tips
witness
and
statements and everything that were involved. Um, from 1988, there was an unexplained decline in activity, with the unsolved nature of the case continuing to keep the public on edge. So pretty much from 1988, nothing.
right.
But the public was still like, well, what the
What
fuck
the
are you going to
fuck?
do about all
Because
these other
even though all
murders?
these murders happened
Yeah, it's
earlier,
6 years
the
ago,
bodies are
but
still being found,
yes,
and that's why they're like it's still alive.
it wasn't until 2001 that a breakthrough came into play. Advancements in
2001.
2001. So it was
Jesus, I don't remember
18
it being.
years later.
I don't remember it being that far in ahead. Yeah.
I know. So, advancements in DNA testing allowed investigators to re examine evidence collected in the 1980s. Semen samples from several victims, including Wendy Caulfield, the first known victim, matched a certain truck painter who had been suspected early in the investigation, named Gary Ridgway.
So he had sex with them and killed them. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And then sometimes went back and had sex with their bodies after they were deceased.
Oh, I missed that. So he did do a Ted Bundy on it.
He did, but I do think that as the situation progressed, it got harder and harder for him to do
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
um,
Jesus
because there was
Christ,
police
necrophilia, man. That's
everywhere.
something else, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's all gross and
yeah,
horrible, but fucking necrophilia to relive the moments.
I know it's really
Tapped.
bad. So, who was Gary Ridgway? I hear you ask.
Who was
Well,
Gary Ridgway? Who was Gary Ridgway?
I mentioned him briefly as a potential suspect for those of you paying attention. Gary Leon
You
Ridgway,
did.
born February 18th, 1949, known as the Green River Killer, is an American serial killer convicted of 49 murders, making him one of the most prolific in US history. So he's second in terms of body count next to Samuel Little, I think it is, who killed 60 confirmed.
Is he the one who killed the little boys?
I think no, I think he's the one who killed a lot of police officers, but also a lot of women. Um,
Because there's one as well, but he may be Mexican.
oh,
Um,
that's the Ricardo
and he killed
Rivera's
like all down
Ramirez
the
Ramirez Rivera's or something.
he killed not
Ricardo
the night.
Ramirez or something.
Let me just say
I think he might be the third one.
that's that's a Night Stalker. No,
Oh, okay.
it's a guy who they think he's killed up to hundreds of little boys, but they didn't have it all.
Right.
Yeah, like
Right.
along a
Okay.
highway or some shit. But anyway, continue.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So at the time that I was looking at
Yeah,
Wikipedia, Samuel Little was number one in the US based on victim count. Gary Ridgway is still second based on
yeah.
confirmed victim count as well. His crimes committed between the early 1980s and late 1990s primarily targeted sex workers and vulnerable women, including underage runaways. Nicknamed by the media after the first 5 victims were discovered in the Green River, Ridgway typically strangled his victims either manually or with ligatures and disposed of their bodies in secluded wooden areas of King County, Washington. He often returned to the crime scenes to engage in necrophilia.
Ick.
Although
So
Ridgway was, yep,
sorry, I was just going to say, just did a quick Google. The guy I was talking about is the world's most horrendous serial killer. So he's
right.
in Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Luis Garavito,
Uh,
193 proven victims,
oh,
possible 194 to 300 plus.
oh my God, that is so
The
bad.
beast, yeah, confessed to killing 140 boys between 6 and 16 years old, between 92 and 99.
Oh my God.
I know
That's
that's a
awful.
lot.
Please don't do him. I don't want to hear
I know,
about
I don't
him.
think I could do that. That's a bit too much.
So although Ridgway was a suspect as early as 1982, investigators lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him. Advances
Well,
in DNA
same
profiling,
happened with old mate.
yeah, exactly, eventually linked him to the murders, leading to his arrest on November 30th, 2001, near his workplace, the Kenworth Truck Factory in Renton, Washington. He was still working at the same place he was working at
Mm,
when he was murdering those girls. He was born in 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, the second of Mary and Thomas Ridgway's 3 sons. His home life was somewhat troubled. Relatives have described his mother as domineering and have said that while young, he witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. His father was a bus driver who would complain often about the presence of sex workers.
no.
Ridgway had a bedwetting problem until he was 13, and his mother would forcibly wash his genitals
Yeah.
after every episode. He would
And you know,
later,
bedwetting and stuff like that, what that comes from, child abuse,
yeah, that's what they
usually
say.
sexual as well.
He would later tell defense psychologists that as an adolescent, he had conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction towards his mother and
Yeah.
fantasized about killing her.
And
Ick.
so many of them. Fucking Edmund Kemp, the same. Yeah.
Ridgway is dyslexic and was held back a year in high school. When he was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. Ridgway had led the boy into the woods and then stabbed him through the ribs into his liver.
Jesus Christ.
They don't say why. So this would have been,
He's
you
just
know,
tapped.
this would have been the late 50s, early 60s. Ridgway's IQ was recorded as being in the low 80s.
Wow.
So there's times when I want to say he was clearly an intelligent person to be able to lead people astray and not get caught, but he didn't have a very high IQ.
Yeah.
So that says, maybe it was luck and the fact that the scientific evidence was just not on the police's side,
Yeah. And I think even with that type of stuff, like he might have had street smarts.
Yeah, potentially that could be
Yeah.
it. Um, so he attended Tylee High School in 1969 and married his 19-year-old high school sweetheart, Claudia Craig. He joined the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship, saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway had frequent sexual intercourse with sex workers and contacted gonorrhea. Although
Yes.
angered by this, he continued this activity without protection. The marriage ended within a year.
Ick.
When questioned about
So it
Ridgway,
was always sex worker's fault, not his fault.
or his mother's,
Yes.
or
Or
his
his mother's
father,
fault.
for
Yeah.
hating sex workers. When
But I mean,
questioned,
like like him getting gonorrhea wasn't his fault for
yeah,
reading sex
yeah,
workers
it was their fault.
unprotected. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when questioned about Ridgway after his arrest, friends and family described him as friendly but strange. His first two marriages, so he's married 3 times. His
Not once,
first
not twice, but thrice.
That's right. His first two marriages resulted in divorce because of infidelity by both partners. His second wife, Marsha Winslow, claimed that he had placed her in a chokehold. He became religious during his second marriage, going door to door, reading the Bible aloud at work and home, and insisting that his wife follow the strict teachings of their pastor.
What a
Ridgway
fucker.
would also frequently cry after sermons or reading the Bible. Despite his beliefs, Ridgway continued to solicit the service of sex workers and wanted his wife to participate in sex in public and inappropriate places, sometimes even in areas where his victims' bodies were later discovered. So according to women in his life, Ridgway had an insatiable sexual appetite. His 3 ex-wives and several ex-girlfriends reported that he demanded sex from them several times a day. Often he would want to have sex in public areas or in the woods. So the third wife that he married, guess when he married her?
1982.
1988. So
Um,
that's when it all stopped
oh,
and
okay.
it tapered off. But he had a son with the second wife, Marsha. So Ridgway had been questioned and polygraphed in the 80s, but was ruled out due to lack of evidence. After his arrest in 2001, he pleaded guilty in 2003 to 48 murders as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He later claimed responsibility for over 70 murders, though not all were confirmed. Ridgway admitted to targeting vulnerable women because he believed that they would not be missed. He confessed to returning to the
He was right
bodies.
in some point.
He was, yeah. He confessed to returning to the bodies for necrophilic acts, as Bundy had theorized. 21 lives in 21 months.
Fucking hell.
That was one a month pretty much, but not as evenly spaced as that.
Yeah,
Sometimes it
yeah,
was a
yeah.
couple of months and then the opportunity probably didn't present him. He might have been working night shift or some
Yeah,
shit
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
But on average, yeah.
So Ridgway was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 49 confirmed murders. So they were going to give him the death penalty, but the reason that they didn't is because there were so many unsolved cases, and they
And they
made a
need
plea.
him.
They needed him to tell him where some of them were, and
Yeah.
also to confirm the identity of some of them, which he went on to do. He did a few of them. He told them ones that they hadn't found. He told them a possible identifying information because he didn't always remember.
Yeah.
He didn't know their names in lots of cases, or they might not have even told him their real name anyway. So he gave them information that helped identify them, but they still believe that there could be unidentified cases right now.
Yeah.
So let's have a look. So the last thing that I wanted to mention about this
Yeah, I'm excited
case
about this part.
is that the manhunt was televised in 1988. So they were appealing for the killer to come forward. Imagine that happening now. So what
Yeah.
they did was a TV show, and it was called Manhunt Live: A Chance to End the Nightmare. So it was a TV show.
Wow.
Think of in the vein of like a telephone event, you know, where
Yeah,
they do the
telethon.
telethon, exactly like a telethon, but presented like an episode of America's Most Wanted. Um, Patrick Duffy was the dude who did it. Do you
My
know who Patrick
God.
Duffy is? The
I know
guy
that
from
name.
Dallas, Step by Step, the TV show with Suzanne Summers and all the kids. You'll know him as soon as you see
Yes,
him.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh
Um,
my God. Yeah. Like that is just like the police or authorities would never allow themselves to appear so incompetent by doing something like this.
well, the police were on it.
That's what I
So
mean. Like these days, I mean.
yeah, exactly. But this is the desperation. They were so desperate to find this killer, and they were getting so much pressure from the public to have to find him. That was someone's solution. I don't know whose solution was. I can't figure that piece out. But one of the
Simon Cowell.
documentaries open with the televised event, and I was like, oh my God, that's Patrick Duffy. What is going on? So there's a vague part of me that actually remembers this televised event because it was 88. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's slightly familiar to me. Anyway, but I can't even imagine. It's so
Yeah. It would never
sensational to think about it.
I would assume it would never happen again today.
I know it wouldn't happen in this day and time, but so Patrick Duffy asks him. So this is the lead investigator for the county. So this is this Dave Reichart, who I've quoted a number of times throughout
Yeah.
this retelling. Patrick Duffy goes to him, Dave, I know that if this Green River killer is watching, that you would like to say to him. Oh, hang on. What would you like to say to him? So, Dave, I know that if this Green River killer is watching, what would you like to say to him? So, Dave goes, the head investigator. You know, I've worked this case for over 6 years now, and I feel very confident someone will soon be leading us to you. We are not giving up because we are going to catch you. You better turn yourself in. This nightmare will not end. It still haunts you during every waking hour. If you have the guts and the courage, call me. It's time for us to talk.
If you have the guts or the courage, you fucking wanker. Can you imagine
It's
that
it's
guy?
actually quite heartbreaking because I watched the documentary from Dave's perspective,
Yeah.
and him and the two other lead investigators, not the FBI ones, they are visibly emotional. It was
Oh, I could
18
imagine.
years that they dedicated their lives to trying to catch this guy, and they had him in the very first year.
Yeah.
And when they got the DNA testing, one of the dudes comes up to him and he said, and he recounts what happens in the documentary. And he comes up, and this one's the Catching Killers documentary. You've got to watch this one. He comes up and he hands him the envelope, and he said, I've got a breakthrough I need to, and grabs the other chick, and her name is Faye Brooks, and she was a sex crimes worker, and they brought her in because she dealt with a lot of the prostitution and stuff like that and picking them up, and they brought her in. So they were the three lead investigators, and the other dude was like the organizer. He had a really organized mind, so he went through all the tips and tried to make sense of them and collate them and categorize them and stuff. So he got the DNA tested, and then he got them in a room and he handed the envelope over. And before Dave, the lead investigator, even opened it, he turned to him and he said, it's Gary Ridgway, isn't it? And they had other suspects as well, but they were the
Yes.
two
Yeah.
main
The
ones.
big ones.
But he always knew on some level that it was
It
him.
was
And then he
him.
opens it and it's Gary Ridgway.
Wow. Could you imagine Gary Ridgway watching that documentary? I mean, not the documentary, the telethon
Yeah.
with his wife at the time, being like, "Oh, does anyone
Yeah.
want a
Yeah.
another glass of red?" Or
And see, I don't think he was one of those ones who actually gave a shit. Like he wasn't taunting the police or
yeah, yeah,
anything.
yeah.
I don't actually think he cared. Like, and I reckon he probably went to bed every night going, fuck, I can't believe they haven't caught me yet.
Well,
What? Like, what
13
the
years
fuck?
later, it's still
18 years
after.
later.
Well, after the telethon,
Yeah, yeah.
13 years later, and he finally gets caught.
Yeah. But that documentary was really, really good because watching them when they just talked about finding the body after body after body, and it was the same three people that went to every single crime scene for every single body, some,
Yeah,
50 odd
that would be.
times.
Imagine the nightmares they've had, the amount of fucking
Oh,
sleepless nights.
they all got so emotional, and they were all interviewed separately and talked about different parts of the case. But every time they talked about another body being found, they'd tear up and like have to sort of turn the
Here
cameras
we
off and
go
stuff like
again.
that.
Yeah.
It was really moving. Like I felt like their lives would have only ever been this case.
Mm. Oh, 100% for that long too.
Mm.
And I mean, it would have been their family's fucking life as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. But it's very eerie. I would love for you to see. They actually show most of it in that Catching Killers documentary. They show him talking to the camera and saying stuff, and all the people in the background, and Patrick Duffy's, sort of intro
Yeah,
and
yeah,
what
yeah.
he's doing, and it's just such a weird vibe, man.
And you watch that in Bali.
Yes, I did. And then I came back and watched more documentaries, but they didn't help me. They just gave me a little bit more detail on the victims.
Yeah, which is nice that the victims are getting their stories across.
Yes, that's it. That's it. But there was far too many victims to be able
Mm.
to talk about them all. So
Oh,
I just,
even listing them
went
all
through
would
those.
be half an hour.
Oh, absolutely. It would have taken a really long time. Anyway, that was a tough
Well
one.
done. That
It
was a
was
big one. As I said, when
a
you
lot
said
of
you were doing it, I
research.
was like, oh, go girl. This is a tough one. Because there are so many that like that you could actually, one person could do the whole episode on. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for listening, my dear listeners, our dear listeners, to another episode of Stupid Bitches Say What. Make sure to tell your mates,
Please share and
share,
subscribe
subscribe, and
on the
like.
socials and like everything, please. It's getting close to the end of the year, nearly the end of the
I know, 3 more
season.
episodes and season nine's done. Um, and then next week we're doing pop culture and we're going to go back to an OG format of doing a sort of what's the hap style pop culture, current affairs.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we're
that's
going
going
to
to
do
be
about three
exciting.
stories each of
Yes,
hot topics that are appearing in the current world that
just that
piqued our
week.
interest. Well, it could
That's
be over the
it.
last couple of weeks, couldn't it?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
You know me,
Excellent.
go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Wide flow, no, wide, wide set vagina with a heavy flow. Good
Ick.
night, you stupid bitches.
Good night.
Oh.
Hello.
Yeah, that stupid bitch. Mm-hmm. He's a stupid bitch. What a stupid bitch. That stupid bitch.